Welcome to Down the Garden Path. I'm your host, Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and plant lover. I enjoy discussing down-to-earth tips and advice to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. And I also aim to bring you interesting and relevant topics to educate you all about the landscaping and horticultural industry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Down the Garden Path. Thank you for joining me here today, and I'm so excited to talk about this topic because I'm so unfamiliar, but I've always been curious, and we are talking mushrooms. We are talking mushrooms with Deb McKee Kelly, owner of Frontier Mushrooms in Grey County, Ontario. Deb is a longtime grower and passionate advocate for reconnecting with the natural world. She spent years cultivating gardens, food crops, and for the past 10 years, gourmet mushrooms. Today, her work with mushrooms and mycelium focuses on sustainable growing practices, education, and innovative uses for fungi in food systems. With a deep respect for nature's intelligence and a belief that fungi hold keys to a more resilient future, Deb and her growing partner, Darin, share their knowledge with growers, makers, and curious minds alike. Welcome to the show, Deb.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to talk about mushrooms. Can you tell? And as I said before we started to record, I've grown up eating them, but it's one, like, where the tomatoes come from, where the peppers come from, but I don't know that everybody really understands where mushrooms come from.
Right.
So I thought we would start at the beginning. So how did you come into, how did Frontier Mushrooms come to be?
Well, it all started, my partner and I really had this common enjoyment of growing stuff and wanting to, we had a thought that maybe we would just have one of these huge, massive gardens in the backyard. This is about almost 20 years ago. And if we had any overflow, maybe we would try to sell a little and we very quickly outgrew what we could eat and ended up going to the farmers market. So we became farmers market gardeners about 18 years ago, with a lot of imposter syndrome, feeling like I'm not a real farmer. I shouldn't be at the farmers market. But then it just grew literally and figuratively from there. We grew a lot of different kinds of veggies. We were the kind of stand with, we had some sunflowers here and we had some zucchinis and tomatoes and all the different things, right? And then a few years into it, we started to specialize a little bit. We had noticed there was a gap in the market for lettuces that could be grown, like extend the season for lettuces. And I should clarify a little bit. We started out in Indiana, which is my home state and where I was born and raised. And met my partner there, and he's Canadian. So that's how we ended up here in Ontario. But early on, we were in Indiana, we were doing the farmers markets, and we saw this niche for doing lettuce. And so we started growing lettuce, and we got really deeply into that. We started growing hydroponic lettuce, chemical free, sort of sustainable as much as we could grow in a small footprint, and doing a lot of really innovative things. But one thing he kept saying through the years was, what I think would be really cool to learn how to grow is mushrooms. And I was always sort of like, I don't know. Okay. But then slowly but surely, we got to a point where we had a little bit of time, and we were doing quite well with our lettuce operation and basil and arugula and things like that. So we started dabbling and started reading some books and just began learning a little bit. And like you, we really didn't have a lot of knowledge about how mushrooms grew. That was the part that kind of threw me off at the beginning. I was like, I understand plants, I understand animals. I don't understand this strange, creature, fungus. Plus, there's a little bit of fear around fungus. I find in North America, there's a lot of just unknowns. Yeah, we all grew up eating them out of a can or out of a little till.
Little blue, are those little blue trays, right?
Yeah, the little trays, right? On our pizza or in our pasta, but beyond that, didn't know much. So when we began, we really dove deep into the science of how fungi grow. lots of failures, lots of trial and error. We actually early on we started growing button mushrooms and portobello mushrooms, which is a completely different method of growing than what we grow now. So I'll just say that those are the types that most of the places where those come from are large sort of commercial operations where they have big equipment and they can do lots and lots and lots and people think, oh, well, they're grown in the dark and there's manure, right? Which is true. The types of mushrooms that we shifted into are what I like to refer to as forest mushrooms. And that's because the types of mushrooms that we grow are ones that people have found forever and ever, foraging or walking on a hike in the woods, and you see them growing out of a log or a decaying stump. So the types of mushrooms that we grow primarily are things like oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, lion's mane, which is a really popular one I'll talk about again a little bit more here in a minute. Several different types of oysters. We also grow some that are more medicinal in scope, so reishi or turkey tail mushrooms. And I can talk a little bit more about those in a minute. I will say at the beginning, we don't grow any psilocybin. And that's a question we get asked a lot. So I just thought I would address that up front. We don't for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's illegal to grow them and distribute them. So, and second of all, it's just a whole other learning curve. So I always say, not yet. Maybe someday, if and when the regulations come through, I would love to learn. I would love to dabble a little bit. But for now, culinary mushrooms. So that's how we got started.
Okay. And I think of when you said about foraging in the forest, there's also poisonous mushrooms, right? So it's not just like,
No. And so that the fact that it's really difficult for a lot of people, especially who didn't grow up learning how to forage safely, I feel like what we offer is an opportunity to enjoy safe, what you're getting, clean, mushrooms that are at their peak of freshness and their prime. Because when you go in the forest, first of all, you have to know what you're looking for, because there are lookalikes. There are lots of dangerous ones that can kill a person or really make you very, very sick. And so, and another, the other benefit is that when you are foraging, even if you do know your mushrooms, sometimes by the time you get to them, the critters have gotten there first. So, you're dealing with maybe a little bit of decay, a little bit of bug damage, cleaning bugs out and stuff like that, which isn't that big of a deal. Foragers have been doing it forever, right?
Yeah.
But it gives you those two benefits. I feel like having these grown, we can tell you for sure what they are, and you don't have to worry. People still do ask me at the stand, though. They'll say, "How do you know these are safe?" I get that a lot.
That is so funny, eh? Oh my gosh. We don't ask that about the tomatoes and the grapes, right?
Right.
And you made it like this is an obvious thing, but when you made a distinction about fungi, like I think those of us who've grown up eating button mushrooms and like you said, canned mushrooms, like and in a salad or in a sauce, it's always been like a vegetable. Like I don't know, I've never really I've lumped it in with onions and tomatoes and stuff. So to think of it, they really aren't. They are their own thing, right?
They're their own kingdom. And that actually did not become part of scientific knowledge until I think around the 1850s sometime. They didn't get their own kingdom until the 1850s because everybody lumped them in with veggies. It wasn't until the study of mycology as a separate branch of biology became, and horticulture, that they started to realize they don't fit into these categories. They aren't animals. They aren't vegetables. They're their own kingdom.
Because there is not like a seed, right? There's no seed. There's no seed.
And people often, I use the term mycelium a lot. I mean, I live and work mycelium. And so I a lot of times like to educate folks on what is mycelium, because it's not a seed. The way that just very briefly, sort of the way that the mushrooms that we grow work is that, most of us are familiar with the underside of a mushroom cap where it's got the gills. In those gills are millions and millions and millions of spores. And a lot of people have heard that term, spores, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a fungus thing. And those mushrooms, when they get to that point where they open their gills out, they drop millions of spores and send them out into the wild. And then for those spores to create a mushroom, there's quite a bit of a process. They have to meet up with another spore to create the start of the mycelium. For a simple, I'm just giving the sort of simple
Yeah. Yeah.
way to think of it. So the two spores come
Tinder for
together.
mushroom, baby mushrooms kind of thing.
Right,
No, I'm
baby
just
mushrooms, they
kidding.
become little mycelium. And a lot of times I'm explaining to people that mycelium is the network, right? It's all the little, I always say, if you're walking through the forest and there's a little piece of a decaying log on the side and you kick it with your foot and it falls open, you see all this white thread-like things through there. That's mycelium. Um, White threads are characteristic of mycelium. And mycelium is a really fascinating life form because it's not like there's not a central body with limbs and there's not a central plant stem with a few leaves. There's this ongoing growing network that can go any direction and that can go and scientists are really learning about the ways that these mycelial threads can communicate with each other, with other plants, with other bacteria, the relationships they have with the roots of the trees. It's really part of my passion for what we do because mycelium is still, compared to other areas of biology, I think still pretty misunderstood, or we're still learning a lot about how it works with its ecosystem. And so the mycelium is the vegetative part of the fungus. Like if you think of a plant, the green part is the vegetative part. So to
Right.
analogize that, the mycelium is the vegetative part, the green part.
Okay.
And then the mushroom only fruits when the conditions are right for it to reproduce, because the mushroom itself is the reproductive part. It's like the fruit of the plant or the flower of the plant.
Okay.
That's what the mushroom is.
All right.
It's the fruit or the flower because it's the reproductive part of the fungus. I know it's a
Is there
little
a
confusing.
difference in the mushroom whether it's a fruit or whether it's
Well, we just say fruit. It's in the I guess in the industry or in the field, that's the term we use. The mushroom is fruiting. So if
okay?
you're walking through the woods, oh, those lion's mane are starting to fruit on the tree.
Mm,
And
okay.
so when we talk about the fruiting body, a lot of times you'll see maybe some of your listeners are familiar with mushroom supplements and things like that. And in the literature, when they're reading about it, it might say derived from the fruiting body of the mushroom, as
Okay.
opposed to the mycelium. This is something that I talk about a lot with customers because they have a lot of questions about these supplements that have become popular. I'm taking this supplement, but can you tell me what part is what? And
Hmm.
so when you start digging into the rabbit hole of medicinal mushrooms and functional mushrooms, you'll find that some are made from the mycelium, the
Okay.
vegetative part of the fungus, those little white threads,
Right.
and some are made from the fruit
The
body,
fruit.
the
Okay.
mushroom itself.
Okay. Would the well, when you say about the little threads, would that be similar to like the roots of a plant?
A bit,
A
but
bit. Okay.
more, yeah, a bit, but more complex,
Okay.
and they do a lot more. They are more analogous to the green part of the plant,
Okay.
but they're
Okay.
also the root. They are everything. They're
Yes.
really fascinating.
Okay. So now how do you go from something that kind of happens naturally in the wild
Right.
to actually,
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is
farming
the
it?
mystery. This is the
Hmm.
mystery of kind of when we were first learning, because a lot of growers, when they start out, and we were no exception, um, you start by ordering from a kind of a seed type company, right?
Okay.
So we would order logs that were already inoculated with the mycelium from a company that made them.
Oh,
We used to
okay.
order from companies in Pennsylvania because we were in Indiana, and Pennsylvania is a huge mushroom state, huge in the mushroom industry. So we would order these blocks. We call them blocks or logs. That's an interchangeable term in what we do. And they would send them to us, or we'd go pick them up, these big logs, maybe 5 to 10 pound logs that are like made of hardwood sawdust, because that's what the mushrooms eat. They eat wood.
Okay. So it's like
But then,
it's not like a log from nature. It's a
no,
kind of
this
a
is a
manufactured log.
manufactured. And this
Oh.
is now, this is what we do. We make those.
Oh.
We used
Okay.
to order them that way, and just our first foray into this was we built a fruiting room, a room where the mushrooms fruit.
Okay.
And that was the initial sort of like what you're creating there is you're creating a controlled environment, just like in a greenhouse for plants. You're creating a place where the conditions are, you've got the humidity set properly, you've
Okay.
got the temperature set properly, you've got the lighting and the airflow. So you're recreating the perfect environment, you know, like in the
Wow.
woods. When do mushrooms fruit? Well, they fruit when it's starting to get a little warm, but it's still cool in the evenings or in the shade. It's kind of shady, but there's a little bit of light. It's kind of moist. It's after the
Ooh.
rain, right? So that's what we're creating. We're creating a little controlled environment that makes the mycelium say, "Ooh, this is a good place to reproduce. I think I'm going to send my fruit up here."
Wow.
So it's
So it's
like
in a room, like it's not like you're out in the field.
nope, nope. You could do
Ooh.
that. And we do sell supplies to folks who do like hobbyist mushroom growing.
Okay.
This is becoming more popular. You hear the term sometimes log inoculation, or yeah, I guess that's the main term, but just
Yeah.
basically planting the mycelium out in the bush and giving it the right conditions. So it's obviously a lot less predictable because you're dealing with more fluctuations in temperature, but a lot of people are starting to learn about that hobby and enjoy. We get people coming to us now say, okay, I have a little spot in my bush. I have some logs. Do you have mycelium? Because there are articles popping up about this now, teaching people how to create a little mushroom garden. It's very exciting. But
Very
we do
exciting.
ours in a room because it allows us to more consistently produce. You know, when you're producing for sale to retail customers at farmers
Yeah.
markets,
Yeah.
restaurants, you have to be consistent, right?
Yes. And so does that also allow you to do, like, it's not just one harvest, right? That would happen in
Oh,
the forest. Now you can kind of continuously produce.
yeah, you can harvest from those logs multiple times. We have a process by which we cycle them in and cycle them out. We have an incubation room where the because now that we make our own logs, we have our own lab, and instead of using seeds, we use pieces of the mycelium, because if you give the mycelium food, it'll just keep expanding.
Okay.
The big trick is contamination, because the things that fungus like to eat, these, the hardwood, sometimes there's usually a little bit of fat mixed in or a little bit of a protein source mixed in. And then all the moisture that feeds the type of fungus that we grow feeds lots of other types of fungus and bacteria and things like that.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the part that is sometimes an obstacle for new mushroom growers. And
Okay.
that's something that we've really started to expand upon in our business, which is the training and growing of new growers. Because
Oh,
we've been doing it long enough now, and now we do the lab portion. So we're able to sell our logs to other growers in other parts of Ontario and then we help them dial in their fruiting rooms, their little farms, right? And make sure that
okay.
if they're running into trouble, these are things that we've experienced before and we
Yeah.
can help them sort those out. So
That's wonderful. The thing that came to my mind was beer making almost,
yeah,
like,
very similar.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know why that popped into my mind, but I
Well,
felt like that was very much
because
a,
yeah, because a yeast and a mold, these are all involved. Fermentation, mold, fungus, these are all part of that same kingdom of fungus. Even though we don't think of beer as fungus related, it is.
yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Now, would you have a room for each type? Like you mentioned lion's mane and shiitake and oyster.
Yeah,
Like, is there kind of,
that's a great question. Yeah, we actually currently have one fruiting room and building a second right now. We have found that the six varieties or so that we grow on a regular basis for our customers, they all thrive in a similar environment.
Good.
Yeah, and part of that is because so we grow chestnut mushrooms, also known as cinnamon caps. Those
Okay.
grow wild here in Ontario in the forest, right next to lion's mane. So lion's mane grow in that same, oysters grow in the same temperature, humidity level. So yeah, we're able to grow all of those in one room where we keep the environment pretty consistent. The second room that we're currently constructing is meant to be a lower humidity. And I think also it will be a little bit lower temperature because we're trying to do some experiments with some different types, especially turkey tail and reishi and maitake. Oh, maitake is my dream mushroom to learn.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Huh. I know I have the only one I've had. I have somebody in our garden club has property behind their house, and it's every other year. But the puffballs. So I come
Yes.
home with from a garden club. Like, literally, the meeting she had so many. Like we all got a puffball, and my husband's like, "What? He did with that?" But it was
Yeah.
fascinating. So I think actually since then, that was a few years ago, and I've
Mhm.
just been fascinated.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that is interesting. And who doesn't love cooking? And we grew up eating those button mushrooms, right? But now,
Mhm.
like my boys, like we're buying really unique mushrooms, shiitake
Yes.
mushrooms. Like it's so different. There's at the grocery store even
Yeah.
there's so much variety. Portobello mushrooms. I
Yeah.
don't know when those like they weren't around when I was a kid.
Right. Not as much when I was young either. I know those were
Yeah,
starting to get a little more popular in the early 2000s, probably late 90s, but yeah, definitely not before then. But yeah, and one thing that I've noticed is there is such an interesting cultural phenomenon. So I supply the St. Jacobs Market in near Waterloo, Ontario, and we get lots and lots of customers from all over the place, all over the world, really, because you've
yeah,
got people coming from Toronto
okay.
and one thing that you find is that those of us who were born and raised in North America really don't have much experience with anything beyond button mushrooms.
Yeah,
And then you've got folks who come from different parts of the world, especially like Eastern Europe, who get really excited when they come and they see my stand because in Eastern Europe, there's really a huge culture of foraging and knowing your forest mushrooms and having huge markets full of all these different types of mushrooms. So I've learned a lot from my customers because I didn't
oh
grow up
yeah,
with that.
yeah.
And then other culture, Asian cultures, and where mushrooms are a huge part of the diet, so I've learned a lot from my customers. It's been a really interesting collaborative experience.
Yeah, I bet. And I bet you can get like feedback from them
Oh yeah,
as well, right?
yeah, especially
Yeah.
on cooking because that's my worst. When people at the market say, "Well, what do you do with these? How do you cook them?" And I'm just super boring. I fry them up with a little bit of garlic and butter.
Yeah.
That's about the extent of it for me. But oh, I have some between chefs that we supply at different restaurants and then home chefs who are really passionate about cooking. I have
Yeah.
heard some amazing things that people do with these mushrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're
Very,
beautiful, right?
oh,
Like
yeah.
they really are so kind of
Oh
artistic.
yeah.
Anybody who's seen those prints, right? Like
Yeah.
there's prints about
Oh yeah.
mushrooms,
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
they're not prints about tomato plants necessarily, right? But they're
They're
like
gorgeous. Yeah.
they're gorgeous.
Well, this is one of my favorite things at market too, because it grabs people's eyes, and sometimes people come up and they'll just look and they'll say, "I don't even like eating mushrooms, but I like looking at them, or I want to draw." Sometimes people who are artists and they say, "Oh, can I take pictures because I want to draw this, I want to paint this." And then my favorite question, which is, "Are these real?" They think I've got an art display there, which is a great compliment.
Yeah, yeah, that you could be that creative, right? To
And then
create
they'll point
those.
to different things. This one isn't real. Is this one real? Isn't that a sculpture? So that's a
Yeah,
great,
yeah, yeah. Or
yeah,
something you craft, right? Like the little
yeah,
things. And I think
yeah,
that's because I think the figurines of colorful mushrooms are in right
yeah,
now, right? So
yeah, big
there's
time. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Mushroom
Oh,
jewelry. It's gotten very trendy, which I mean,
yes.
right place, right time. Yeah,
Yeah,
for us
yeah.
anyway.
For sure. So you sell the fresh, like you go to the market and you sell the fresh mushrooms, but you also
Yes.
sell the logs.
We
Would
sell
you
small grow kits. Yep.
yeah, well you said your website says grow your own kit. So is that different than the logs?
No, so
No.
there are a
Okay.
couple of different ways. We sell a lot of what folks have heard about or seen around called spray and grow. It's just basically a countertop grow kit. It's a couple of pounds of a log. It's about a quarter of the size of the logs that we grow on our farm. We
Okay.
make these at the same time we make our big logs, and then we inoculate them with one of three different types that have been shown to be really pretty foolproof and pretty popular and beautiful when they're growing. So we sell those to hobbyists as a great gift. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm giving this to my brother for his birthday because he loves to cook," or "I'm giving it to my sister because she's all into mushrooms." So it
Yeah.
becomes a really nice gift. Or sometimes people say, "Oh, I've got all my plants set up, and the only thing I need is a mushroom." So they want to put that in with what else they grow. But the other cool part about it is you can take those same kits that are meant for growing on your countertop. You take that same substrate that's inoculated with the mycelium and take it out and put it in your garden, or like you say, if you have a little bit of bush, you can use it to inoculate logs. And then we sell, not at the market yet. We usually do this seasonally. We do the kits year round because they can be done indoors.
Okay.
But in the summer, it becomes a lot more versatile. We also bring a myceliated little wooden dowels. They're, about yay big,
Okay.
3/8 of an inch or so. And they call those inoculation dowels. And those are for people with the logs out in their forest, out in the bush, where they're going to drill holes in it and then tap those little myceliated dowels into the log and then cover that with some paraffin wax or some beeswax and then keep it moist and keep it in a shady spot. And then those will pop up in a year or so with that variety of mushrooms.
Okay. That's a long
So
time. So is that typical?
it is.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's typical because that mycelium has to go from the dowels and then it has to work its way through a dense log
Mm,
before it's ever at the point of fruiting a mushroom. So
I
that's
see.
the natural way.
Okay.
That's the way it works in nature. And that's another reason why, even if you're a forager, even if you're somebody who goes hiking, how many mushrooms do you find on a hike? One?
Yeah.
Depending. It
Yeah.
really depends on conditions. It depends on
Hmm.
timing. It depends on, they're just not, they don't, I mean, we're farming them. We're
Yes.
causing them
Yeah.
we're forcing it,
Yeah.
in which is agriculture, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I always say all agriculture is a type of manipulation and
Yeah.
it's part
Yeah.
of
I
what
think of
I,
this time of year, the tulips in
yes,
Amsterdam, right? Like they're
yes,
forcing that to
yes,
happen, right?
yes. And it's beautiful and it's important, but I'm always really cognizant of, it's a philosophical question for me. I love growing things, but also I want to see the natural world thrive.
Mhm.
And that's
Yes.
one of the great things about I feel like working with mycelium is then I take that final product and it goes out into the forest or into the compost, and hopefully I'm going to be sending spores up and around and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Right. And
and
so you're kind of reproducing, hoping
the
you're right.
ecosystem. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
that is very interesting way to look at it. That is for sure.
Yeah.
So but if we buy it and put it on our kitchen counter, but that's not the
Yes.
same like conditions than your fruiting room.
No, but one thing that the nice thing is they're very versatile in terms of temperature. So I
Okay.
always say they work in room temperature, from anywhere from 15 to 16 degrees all the way up to 25, 26. So most
Okay.
people's home temperature works. And then we send home with each kit, or that's included in each box, is what I call a humidity tent. Use little air quotes because it's essentially a glorified clear plastic bag that
Okay.
goes.
There you say paper bag or something.
No, no, no. It's a clear. It's like a little greenhouse, sort of.
Okay.
And there are instructions on how to place that over the block so that, and then folks, we call them spray and grow because you're gonna spray a little water bottle up inside that tent a couple of times a day to help keep a
Oh,
humid environment
okay.
because the humidity will actually, that water that you spray up in there will condense out and become, it'll make that little micro environment
Yeah.
a little more humid than the outside air.
Okay.
That's really all it needs. And then it needs a little bit of light. People
Yeah.
always say, well, don't I need to keep it in the dark? But again, they're thinking of button mushrooms.
Mm.
Um, Sorry, my kid is going for a bike ride. She was just letting me know. uh, but button mushrooms want to grow in the dark because those types were originally cultivated in big piles of manure in dark barns in horse stalls. That's where they were first found. These types of mushrooms are used to the sun. They want a little bit of light. They're in the
Yeah.
forest canopy. So, your household lighting is fine.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Mhm,
Huh. And the if you were to do the log, like you said, or
mhm.
the little button, and then put it out, and in a
Yeah.
year, is there any chance of contamination in nature, or do you
Yeah.
feel?
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there are some
So
things
you
that
still
you
can't
can.
poison yourself. Is that what you're saying? No.
No, not usually. No, especially if okay, that is the log. We put shiitake into that, and
Yeah.
shiitake is very distinctive. So,
Okay.
now that's one of those pieces of whenever you're working in nature with mushrooms like that. I suppose, yeah, there could be a chance. Now, mycelium is fascinating because a lot of times people will say to me, okay, I've got this grow kit. Can I grow all three mushrooms in one log? And you can't because they fight each other until one wins.
Ah.
So there would be no purpose in us planting more than one type in each of these logs. The same with an outdoor log. Ideally, it will have been cut recently. It'll still be pretty young and fresh. It won't have developed any other mycelial, life form in there, but there's always bacteria, there's always different kinds of things competing for. It's just like if you said, I'm going to plant some lettuce out here in my backyard. I mean, who else is going to eat that lettuce, and what else might grow there in it, right? Because that's
Yeah.
just nature
That's
for
true
you.
too. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but the one that you plant in that log, if you put shiitake dowels in there all across the log, then most likely that's the mycelium that's going to win, that's going to beat out any
Okay.
other organism that is
Yeah.
trying to also get that food source. And there's some timing things that you can do
Hmm.
to increase your chances that one type will prevail.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great gift for people going to a cottage. Like if you're visiting, you know
Oh,
what I mean? They've had enough of the
yes.
bottles of wine and the packages of toilet paper, right?
Right?
Like you'd be invited back if you brought them mushrooms, like a log
Yes,
to
for
grow their own
sure.
mushrooms, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun this time of year as people are starting to think about their cottage, what they're going to do in the summer and going to visit people. And yeah, it's definitely mushrooms on everyone's mind. So,
Oh, that is cool. That is cool.
mhm,
Okay, so in addition to the fresh and the grow your own,
mhm.
there is also because I met you at the St. Jacobs Market and I bought some lion's mane dehydrated
Yes.
powder. So I want to talk about
Yeah.
that because
Okay.
was that always like the next step or
No, that happened somewhat organically because when we began growing lion's mane, the knowledge about it and the research about it had not really exploded to the extent it
okay.
has now. It was actually, we learned a lot about it. I'm not even sure why we started growing it, except that when we first started working with some of these mushrooms, it was one of the big three, those sort of not, not easy to grow, but in the same vein. It grows the same way as the
Okay.
oysters and it grows similar. And so we started growing it and we started learning about it. But at that time, we were actually on Wolf Island near Kingston. I
Oh,
don't know if you
okay.
know that area, but that's where we landed when we came to Ontario for the first time. And we were working with a chef who was in Kingston proper. And that chef was also, believe it or not, working on, well, he worked he was kind of a chef on the side, but he also was doing his PhD in something in neuroscience, really interesting guy.
Oh,
But who
wow.
he was working with was a neurosurgeon at Queen's University in Kingston. And he went and told his advisor at Kingston, this neurosurgeon, hey, there are these hippies over on Wolf Island growing lion's mane. Isn't that something to, and And he wanted to bring his advisor over to tour the farm and show him the lion's mane, because apparently there was big research starting in in the
Yeah.
neuroscience world on lion's mane, because
And
it's
the
become,
benefits, right?
yeah, because it's known as it's a nerve growth stimulator. And that just means that this is me being a little bit scientific about something I just know a little bit about. So
Okay.
please forgive me if my terminology is off. This is my simplification. Um, the nerve growth stimulator part of the lion's mane helps regrow and repair the myelin sheath, which is really important in nerve, signals going back and forth in your nervous system. So
Okay.
what they're finding is some really interesting outcomes for things like memory, cognition, people who are starting to suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's, even people recovering from concussion, diabetic neuropathy, things like that. So the research is really compelling. I feel like it's very sturdy, university peer reviewed, good
Hmm.
research, enough that I feel comfortable. I mean, I'm not Health Canada certified or anything, but people like to buy fresh lion's mane and cook it up. But then many people were coming to me and saying, "Do you sell a pill? Do you sell some kind of a supplement or some kind of a capsule?" Well, you know, once you get into capsule form, that
Mm.
starts to feel too medicinal to me.
Medicinal, yeah.
And again, not Health Canada certified and not
Right.
really in the space to go that direction or want to
Hmm.
focus in that direction. There's lots of people working in that space. So I want to grow a really amazing product. And so what we decided to start doing, we did a little bit of research. We decided to start just dehydrating some portion of our lion's mane and grinding it up in a dedicated, grinder, and then jarring it up for consumption that way. So many people are used to on the market right now. There's all kinds of mushroom coffee, mushroom tea,
Hmm.
mushroom
Yeah.
capsules. So when they ask about that, I will refer them to our lion's mane product,
Yeah.
because it's dried lion's mane and it's so nice just shaken in your coffee.
Yeah. And that tastes better than mushroom coffee. Let me tell you. You can
I'm biased, but I agree.
I agree because I mean
Yeah,
I have it beside my coffee maker after I bought it from you, and I'm like, yeah, I've
right.
tried those when I was at your booth. I'm like, yeah, I've tried that
Yeah,
lion's mane coffee, and I've
yeah,
and stuff, and it's like, and I think
yeah.
and maybe it's fine, but mentally you're just thinking, yeah, I'm just drinking mushrooms, right? Like it's
Well,
hard to get
and
over
there are
that.
two things happening in that marketing space, and one of them is there's a whole line of products that are the goal is to replace your coffee. Cut back
Yes.
on caffeine, so don't have coffee. But the mushroom that they're talking about in those where they call it mushroom coffee, but it's not coffee, it's just mushrooms and some other things. There is a mushroom called cordyceps, and that's a whole other topic. I mean, that would take a whole,
Oh, okay. Whole other
but
show. Okay.
yeah, but cordyceps is a type of mushroom. We don't grow it yet,
Okay.
but it has energy. It helps with energy.
Oh, okay.
And
It's more of a
so they said, okay, we're
stimulant.
going to mix this up. We're going to do cordyceps instead of caffeine because it's more natural and better for you. So there's that kind of mushroom coffee that actually has no coffee in it. And then there's another line of products that are like instant coffees and actual coffee mixed with some functional mushrooms.
Okay.
So there's those two different products or two
Yeah.
different lines of products. And again, it's just there are so much room for products and growth in the mushroom field.
Hmm.
It just made more sense for us to say, hey, here's some dehydrated powdered lion's mane. Put it in your smoothie, put it in your coffee, put it in your tea, put it in your
Yeah.
pasta. You know,
Yeah.
it's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
tasteless, right? Like there's
It's
not really a
tasteless.
taste.
Yeah, it's very nice, and you're getting that concentrated lion's mane benefit without having to go through the. I mean, some people like to, fry up the lion's mane, but a lot of people are just like, hey, I want to get this health benefit in my body. So
Yeah. Yeah. Because you could,
yeah.
as much as you might like that, it's not like something you do every day,
Every
right?
day, exactly. Yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
the sprinkling of, so yeah, they're very nice little jars and
yeah,
sprinkling. So
yeah,
yeah, so that is fascinating. Is
yeah.
there another, I can't remember, is there another mushroom that you also dehydrate? I know you've got
So
the bags of dried mushrooms that people could use to
yeah,
cook and stuff.
right. Well, we don't make any other products at the moment, and
Okay.
part of that is just a sort of what kind of equipment do we need?
Yeah.
Because the other two types of medicinal mushrooms that we grow are called reishi, and the other one is turkey tail. Now, though, the interesting thing about lion's mane is it can be used as a culinary mushroom or as that powder dehydrated. The reishi and the turkey tail are different. Like if you were to harvest them in the wild, they grow wild around here. If you were to harvest them or harvest them fresh, they are leathery,
Mm.
they're bitter. They're not what you would call a culinary mushroom. It's not
Okay.
the kind of thing you slice up and fry with some garlic and throw in your pasta. The reishi has been used for thousands of years in Chinese medicine to make tea. So you take this either leathery fresh mushroom or you take it as the dried version, which we sell dried, unprocessed pieces of reishi
Okay.
at the market. And then
Hmm.
people can take those and make broth out of them or make a tea or make a tincture if they're an herbalist, sort of, if they have that kind of equipment. Um, Grinding reishi up is an interesting process because of how woody and fibrous it is, it actually, when you put it in the grinder, it fluffs. It turns into this weird fluffy stuff. Same with turkey tail. When we first did that, it was like, oh.
Now you know why they call it turkey tail, right? Like,
Yes, something. Yeah, well, it's there's lots of reasons, but it
yeah.
definitely when it's dry and it fluffs. So, figuring out how to process that and how to get it to customers in a way that is consumable, is maybe down the road
Yeah.
or in a partnership or collaboration with someone, which
Hmm.
we'd love. We talk to people about that kind of stuff all the time because people are asking, when can
Yeah.
I get, do you have a reishi product? Do you have a turkey tail product? Turkey tail has been indicated in with some really great outcomes for cancer, preventing cancer, treating cancer,
Wow.
reishi as well, the immune boosting. And so,
Hmm.
but again, we're kind of walking that fine line between a supplement or a food product. And
Yeah.
I mean, food is medicine, and these especially.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But
But I think it is better to kind of focus on what you know and what you can produce successfully,
yes,
right? And kind
yes,
of stay in your lane.
exactly, because
And
there's
know
too many
enough to,
ways to go.
yeah, yeah. I mean, otherwise you're just dabbling, right? And
Yeah,
then,
yeah, exactly.
so that's great. And three, I
Yeah.
would say doing those three is quite a
Yeah.
bit too, right?
Yeah, it's a lot. And then, as I was saying earlier, one of the things that really excites me is thinking about up and coming growers or people who, they've got this, maybe they've been dreaming of growing something, but they don't really know how to get into it. Or maybe they go to their farmer's market and they're like, oh man, this farmer's market really needs some mushrooms. It doesn't have any mushrooms. Since there's 180, I think, Ontario approved farmers markets, and that's just with Farmers Markets Ontario. That's not even counting like other farmers markets all over that could
Yeah.
use a little mushroom grower. So I
Hmm.
love the idea of becoming both a supplier for those growers and sort of someone who can help train and bring almost like an Ontario mushroom growers network,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's
to
interesting.
share
Well, I hope the
knowledge.
podcast helps you do that. I hope I
That
can
would be
connect you
amazing.
to other, because you're in Wellington County, Gray
Mhm.
County, and I'm in
Yep.
Durham region, and
Yeah,
so you never know,
you
right?
never
I think
know.
that's
That's right.
fascinating. And for our listeners who are in Ontario that are
Mm.
not necessarily near you, you do have a shop, and do you ship as well
We
on your
do.
website?
Yes, we ship our lion's mane powder currently. I'm probably going to put the grow kits up to ship again, but I've been a little hesitant because the shipping price is almost as much as the kit itself.
Yeah.
But, people ask about it all the time. So I think
Hmm.
probably that's an obvious next step.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it's certainly worth it to go to St. Jacob's Market. So if
yes.
you can
Yeah.
go, you're there Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays.
That's right. Well, right this time of year, Thursdays and Saturdays, and
Okay,
then starting in June, we go
Tuesdays.
Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. But the Tuesday markets are pretty. That's a short window of the summer. But we're
Okay.
we're there year round on Thursdays and Saturdays.
Yeah, which is fascinating. And it is a very big, like I know when I went young, much younger, 25 years ago before kids, like it was a very, and then when we went a few weeks ago, it was like, oh my, because we had stopped. I don't know if we told you, we went through the first building, right? And my girlfriend and I were together and we're like, oh, she's like, well, isn't there a butcher? Like, isn't there more? And so we saw, the earring lady, we asked her and she goes, oh yeah, you got to go through the back door. And she goes, and it's like, and we were like, wow. So it really is worth the
Yeah.
drive, you know.
Yeah. It's quite a
Um,
trip. Yeah.
yeah, it's quite the trip, and quite a variety of like produce and you name it, right? The butchers,
Yeah.
the fresh
Yeah.
meat,
Yeah.
and then the mushrooms. So that was really really a really cool find. So
Yeah.
Nancy and I both bought some, and
Mhm.
I need to use it every day, but
Yes. Yeah.
right.
I know I keep
Um,
it by my coffee because then I'm always gonna have my coffee, but yeah.
yes, yes, that is good. And do you find that like people keep coming back for more?
They
Yeah,
do. I have many return customers. They finish it, they come back, they get more. They say, I'm gonna get one and send it to my mom, or oh, I'm gonna get one for it's a gift. We're
yeah.
getting a lot of return customers, which makes it's very validating. I feel good about that. So
Yeah, excellent. So frontiermushrooms.com,
that's
right?
right. Mhm.
Excellent. Or .ca. I know you've got that. No, it's not
It can
connected
go
yet.
either way. It'll
Okay, it can
connect
go either
either way.
way. Okay.
Mhm.
Excellent. And I think it's cool that I let you kind of thought about strategically to go to the end user, like the homeowner as well, or the cook,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also to help other people because you're right. I mean, we have a lot of land and a lot of
Yes.
farmers, and
Yes.
I think we need to encourage it because it's
Yes.
something you can start in a fairly small scale too, right?
You can, yeah. And it's a nice way to diversify for some
Mm.
farmers who are looking for ways to maybe become a little bit more sustainable, or maybe they want to add an interesting product to their offerings, or maybe
Yeah.
they've started a CSA and their CSA members, they're getting their lettuce and their eggplant and their zucchini and their, oh, wouldn't it be nice to be able to throw in a pound of
Mushrooms.
mushrooms.
Yeah.
So these are things that we're hearing people wanting to do, but they don't want to do that huge investment of building an entire lab and learning every single part of the process. So I
Right.
like the idea of, helping them, start the way we did.
Yeah.
Start with a fruiting
Yeah.
room, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that is so cool. And I like the fruiting room idea. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure chefs in restaurants, right? And
Yes, yes. They definitely really appreciate it because these are the types of mushrooms that really they they don't they're not the kind of thing that you can ship across country and
right.
are going to last for weeks and weeks,
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things you harvest by hand, you get them to the cooler, and then hopefully they're in the consumer's hand or on the grocery shelf a few days after harvest. And that way you keep it nice and fresh, get it to the chef, and then it gets served before they start to go off, right? Yeah.
Excellent. And it also must be a product that, because I know you were in when I read your bio about reconnecting with the natural world. I
Mm.
mean, I'm guessing you're not needing like herbicides and like a
No.
lot of like,
Oh
you
no.
know,
And that's actually been something that's been our policy since day one. I am a two-time cancer survivor. I was,
mm,
lucky to have breast cancer when I was quite young, and it changed the way. That's why I got into growing food, because I started thinking about all these things that are sprayed and
yeah,
around in the soil and whatnot. And so we are adamant we don't spray any pesticides, herbicides. We don't use chemical processes at all. And then we're not certified organic because that's a real barrier for something like mushrooms that you're growing
yeah,
on hardwood. But we keep it clean, we
yeah.
keep it safe. That's a huge priority of ours. So
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I would think that's necessary. Like it seems like counterproductive, right? That you'd be spraying something like a crop, you know what I
mhm.
mean? So
Yep, yep, yep.
yeah, yeah.
That's a whole
So
other topic, but yes.
yes, yeah, yeah. No, I mean this is fascinating. I'm so excited to learn, and I do really like it's really not much of a taste, a few sprinkles. You said
Oh.
5 grams, right? 5 grams a
I,
day?
I only use a gram. I always say a gram a day.
Okay, a
Now,
gram a day.
that's not for any, other than there are some current human studies where they use a gram a day per participant. So I'm
Okay,
like, okay, well, if that's good. But a lot of people say, okay, I don't want to go over that. But it's not unsafe. It's more
right.
of a spread it out so it lasts a little longer. It's already
Yes, yes.
concentrated. So a gram
Yeah,
a day,
yes. Oh,
a
that's
fifth,
great.
that's a fifth of a teaspoon. So
Fifth
yeah,
of a
yeah.
teaspoon.
That's why
Yes.
3 or 4 shakes, you're covered.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know, and that's so good, right? You're not having to find that teaspoon and do the measuring or do the
Yeah.
weighing or anything
Yeah,
like that.
right.
So that is good. Well, this has been really fascinating to learn about mushrooms and growing mushrooms and a
Yeah.
fruiting room, like some terminology I'm not familiar with at all. And I think that's so exciting. And now we can all appreciate it when we see it at the grocery stores, because some of them are more available at the grocery stores or the Asian markets and things,
Yeah.
which I do highly recommend you visiting, Deb, at the St. Jacob's Market as well, because it's definitely worth the trip for a lot of reasons. And
Or
um,
go to your local farmers market and see if
yep,
you can find the market manager and say, hey, has anybody talked about growing mushrooms here? Or, is there anybody who is looking at doing that? Because,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting because I've had a hard time finding somebody to speak about mushrooms. So,
yeah,
so thank you.
for sure.
As you
It's
know, when I
great.
was so excited and I was like whipping out my business card, trying to find my business card at the booth, right? And
Yeah, of
Nancy's
course.
like, "What are you doing?" So, but I'm
I
like, "No,
appreciate
this
it.
is
I
so
love the opportunity
exciting."
to talk about it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. So that is great. So thank you so much for joining us and educating us on this. So again, frontiermushrooms.com.
Yep.
I'll have all this information in the show notes. Anything else you want to share or
I
talk
can't think
about?
what it would be.
No,
I can't.
no. Okay,
One quick thing.
sure.
Okay, it's morel season, right? Everybody knows about going and hunting morels in the forest.
Okay,
What are
not
they?
me,
I
but
don't know.
okay.
You don't know? Okay, so if some of your listeners might know what morels are, it's a very special type of forest mushroom that grows wild around here. And people ask me all the time, do you grow morels? And I say, oh, if only. There's a certain types of mushrooms that grow in the forest that humans haven't figured out how to cultivate yet. They're very complicated. They have a very
Oh,
complicated relationship with the environment. So for all of your morel loving folks out there, this is the time, but you got to go to the forest to find them and get yourself a good identification book because you're not
okay,
going to find them with a mushroom grower, unfortunately. But yeah,
okay, okay.
come
How
to
about the
me through the
apps, like
lion's
the
den.
iNaturalist and the Google Lens? Like the apps are pretty good, right? At identifying.
I think so. I think
I know.
so. I mean, it's hard to say, right? It's
Yeah.
it's scary business. So get a good
Yes.
guide. Yeah.
Get a good guide. Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
morale season. Excellent. Well, thank
Mhm.
you so much, Deb. I
Yes.
really enjoyed meeting you and learning on this little education, and I'm sure my listeners will as well. So
Thank you
thank
for
you.
inviting me, and I'll see you again at the market, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You will. You will. So thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Down the Garden Path, all about mushrooms. So we'll see you next week.